Okay, so we're diving into this uh, rising tide of anti-Semitism and, especially in college campuses. You sent over this article, right, about a bunch of Jewish students. They went to Israel
Yeah.
to learn about fighting back against, well, all this prejudice. And it seems like they got uh, a lot more than just like a history lesson.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And what's really interesting here, I think, is that the article focuses on, their own personal experiences with anti-Semitism
Hmm.
and how that like fueled their desire to kind of push back. It's not just about like understanding the problem, but actually finding their voice and actually doing something about it.
Yeah, for sure. And some of these stories, I mean, wow, they're really eye-opening. One student, Angelina Palumbo, she talked about like her first day of college, right? And she's just hit with all these comments to her beliefs, her appearance, even her family's finances. It went from like attacks on her supporting Israel to straight up prejudice. I mean, one quote really stuck with me. It was, use that dirty Zionist money to get a nose job, leave some oxygen for the rest of us. Like, how do you even respond to that?
Yeah.
I
I know, right? It's awful. But it really highlights how anti-Semitism often just blends this religious and racial prejudice. It goes way beyond disagreeing with someone's political views. It becomes about, dehumanizing someone, attacking their identity as a Jewish person.
Definitely. And it seems like Angelina's experience, unfortunately, isn't that unique. There's another student, David Lederer. He talked about witnessing just constant harassment at Columbia University, which, has kind of become a flashpoint for really aggressive anti-Zionist activism. He mentioned like friends being called slurs, threats being made, just like a really, really hostile environment for Jewish students.
Yeah, and that climate of fear is actually reflected in something Michael E. Glash said. He's the one who organized the trip. He said, Jewish students are under attack on the campuses and are made to feel very insecure and uncomfortable. It's a powerful quote. And it makes you think about, what's going on in society as a whole, right? Because anti-Semitic incidents, they're increasing both online and in person. It's pretty scary.
It is. It is. And that brings us to the core of this whole deep dive, I think. The trip itself. It wasn't just about raising awareness. It was about giving these students like the actual tools to combat anti-Semitism.
Hmm.
The article makes this strong connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and it seems like that was a key focus of the trip, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, there's a quote from English where he says, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, right? If you don't believe in the right for the Jewish people to have a homeland in the ancient homeland of Israel, then that's anti-Semitic. And it's so important to understand that, denying the Jewish people that right, while at the same time advocating for other groups to have self-determination, I mean, that's just inherently discriminatory.
It is. And it seems like going to Israel, actually being there,
Hmm.
played this crucial role in like helping them push back against that, against
Yeah.
those double standards that they were seeing on campus.
Right, because sometimes firsthand experience can be so powerful. It can really challenge what you think, challenge the propaganda you've been exposed to.
Absolutely. Like take Palumbo. She was constantly hearing about Israel being this apartheid state,
Mhm.
committing ethnic cleansing, even denying historical events like the October 7th War. But then she gets there and she sees street signs in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. And she actually experiences the diversity of Israeli society firsthand.
And it just directly challenges that whole narrative, that narrative of colonialism and oppression that's often pushed so hard on some campuses. I think misinformation really thrives when people just don't have that direct contact. They haven't experienced the reality on the ground.
Exactly. And Lederer, he had a similar experience. He said, it's nothing at all like what they're talking about on campus, and it's important to see it. It seems like for a lot of them, this contrast between the propaganda and the reality, that was a real turning point.
And that's where critical thinking comes in, right? We can't just rely on secondhand information, not with something this complex, something this emotionally charged.
Definitely not. And the article brings in this other interesting perspective with Natan Sharansky. He's a really prominent figure in the whole fight against anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And he met with the students, encouraged them to like really stand up proudly for their Jewish identity and for the Jewish nation.
Yeah.
He even argued that you can't really have a strong Jewish identity without recognizing the central role of Israel.
And it seems like that message really hit home for these students. They'd been facing so much negativity. It's almost like hiding their identity seemed like the only option. But Sharansky saying, no, embrace it, own it.
Yeah. You can see that shift in their attitudes. Jakubowicz, for instance, she says, for me, I wear it on my sleeve. Within 5 minutes of knowing me, you know that I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli, I speak Hebrew, and I'm so excited about it. It's like they found this newfound confidence to just be who they are.
And that's a powerful statement. Because owning your identity can be such a powerful weapon against prejudice. It lets you take back the narrative. You're challenging those stereotypes that are used to marginalize you, to dehumanize you.
Yeah. And this is where the article takes this interesting turn. Lederer, remember him? He was talking about the hostility he and other Jewish students were facing at Columbia. Well, he makes this really heartfelt plea to Christian students, and he actually expresses gratitude for the support he's gotten from some of them.
That's interesting, right? Considering, the long, complex history of Jewish-Christian relations, it really suggests that there's this potential for some real interfaith solidarity against anti-Semitism.
Yeah, he says, Jewish students have been forced out of the clubs, out of student government, out of various sectors of the university, and the only allies we have who can understand us and who can talk to us are the Christian students. I just want to say thank you to my Christian neighbors. Hope you had happy holidays. You can hear the urgency in his voice. It's like he's saying, we can't do this alone.
Exactly. He's making it clear. Anti-Semitism isn't a Jewish problem. It's everyone's problem. And it needs allies from all different backgrounds. So we've talked about some pretty heavy stuff here, shocking examples of anti-Semitism, the link with anti-Zionism, and the power of actually experiencing things firsthand. But I think there's a bigger question here.
I think so, too, because these students, they were already actively fighting anti-Semitism before the trip. So what exactly did they learn in Israel? What's going to help them be more effective? What are they bringing back to campus? What are these specific strategies?
And, how do their experiences fit into the bigger picture? What can universities do to create a more inclusive environment?
Right. Good questions. Those are perfect jumping off points for part 2 of this whole deep dive, I think. We'll explore those strategies, the broader implications of this whole experience, so stick with us. It really strikes me that this wasn't just like a fun trip, like sightseeing and lectures, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was more like they really designed it, this experience, to give these students the tools, the real tools to combat anti-Semitism.
Yeah, exactly. You get that sense from the article, right, that it was really immersive. It wasn't just like, here's the history, here's the politics. They met with all these different Israelis, heard their stories, experienced how complex the region really is firsthand.
Yeah. And one of the students talked about visiting a kibbutz that had been hit by Hamas rockets. I mean, that's going to make it real, right?
Yeah.
In a way no textbook ever could.
Oh, absolutely. It just humanizes the whole thing, It takes it away from this abstract political debate and shows you the human cost, the violence, the terrorism. It's real people who suffer.
Right. And the article doesn't get into, like, the specifics, the exact strategies they learned. But it does talk about how important it is to be prepared, to counter the misinformation that's out there.
And that is crucial these days, right? With social media and everything, these false narratives can spread so fast. So being able to look at information critically, to spot bias, and just present the facts accurately, that's such an important skill.
It is. It is. And they're also encouraged to share their own stories.
Yeah.
Their personal experiences with anti-Semitism, both to raise awareness and to connect with others who've been through something similar.
Yeah, and there's something really powerful about that, isn't there? Sharing your story. It can be empowering for the individual, but it also breaks down these stereotypes, helps people, maybe who haven't experienced it, helps them understand, builds empathy.
Yeah, and it challenges that idea that anti-Semitism is just a thing of the past, It's like, no, it's happening right now. These students are living it. It's a real danger.
Right. And this trip, it seems like it was really transformative for a lot of them. It wasn't just about, facts and figures, but about them reclaiming their story, their identity, feeling like they can make a difference.
Totally. And the article ends by saying that, most of these students were already active, right, fighting anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
But they're going back to campus with this renewed sense of purpose, I think, and a deeper understanding of the challenges.
Yeah, they've been given this toolkit, not just to defend themselves, but to really go on the offensive, to challenge anti-Semitism wherever they see it.
That's a good way to put it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this, the hate, the intolerance. But these students, they're like, individuals can make a difference.
And it shows how powerful education is and awareness. These are weapons against prejudice the more we understand it. The roots of anti-Semitism, the different forms it takes, the impact it has. The better equipped we'll be to actually fight it.
For sure. We've been focusing on the students, right? But it raises this bigger question, doesn't it?
It does. If you zoom out a little, think about institutions, universities, governments. What's their role?
What can universities do to make things better, to be more inclusive, more welcoming to Jewish students? And what about governments? How can they fight this rise of anti-Semitism in society as a whole?
And I think, most importantly, what about us? What can we do as individuals to help build a more tolerant world, a just world, where everyone feels safe and respected?
There's big questions there.
They are, but they're crucial questions. And maybe, maybe by having these difficult conversations, we can start finding solutions, creating a more hopeful future.
I like that. But for now, maybe we should go back to, just how strong these students were, how resilient. They saw some really disturbing stuff, but they chose to use that to take action.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Their trip wasn't just about learning, it was about empowerment. They didn't just come back informed, they came back ready.
And they remind us that this fight against anti-Semitism, against all kinds of prejudice, it takes courage. And it takes everyone. It takes all of us working together.
One student said something that really stuck with me. She said that wearing her Jewish and Israeli identity proudly, it was like armor against all that hate.
That's a powerful image. It speaks to the power of just owning who you are, not letting hate define you.
Exactly. It's like sometimes the best way to resist is to just live authentically, unapologetically, be yourself.
And to stand up for others.
Yeah.
When they're facing something similar. You remember David's plea, right? To the Christian students, he was asking them to support their Jewish peers. That call for interfaith solidarity, that really resonated with me.
His message, I think it shows that we need a lot of different approaches to this. It's not enough to just say, we hate hate. We need to build bridges, create a culture where bigotry, any kind of bigotry, it's just not acceptable.
And that brings us to some key takeaways, I think, for all of us, no matter what our background is. First of all, we need to be aware of the many forms that anti-Semitism can take. It's not always obvious, right? It can be subtle, like questioning the Holocaust or denying Israel's right to exist.
Yeah, and recognizing those subtle forms is so important because they create this climate, right? A climate of hostility that can really turn into something much worse.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, I think it's shown us how important it is to experience things for ourselves. These students went to Israel with all these ideas in their heads based on what they'd heard on campus. And a lot of those ideas were just shattered by what they saw for their own eyes.
It shows you can't always trust secondhand information, especially when it comes to things that are so complex, so emotionally charged. You need to see things for yourself, challenge your own assumptions.
Exactly. And you know what? Even though this is such a heavy topic, I'm walking away from this feeling hopeful. Seeing these young people, their courage, their conviction, their determination, it's inspiring.
It really is. And it reminds us that change is possible. But it takes work from all of us. We have to be active if we want to create a more just world, a more compassionate world. And that brings us to a final question, I think. For you, we've explored this specific issue, right? Anti-Semitism. But prejudice, it's so much bigger than that. So how can we, as individuals, help build a more tolerant world, a more inclusive world, where everyone feels safe, respected, valued?
What can we actually do, even small things, to challenge all forms of bias? All forms of discrimination?
Those are the questions, right? The ones we all need to be thinking about. Because at the end of the day, if we want a better world, we can't just sit back and watch. We have to be a part of it. We have to act.
Well said. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a journey, that's for sure. Hopefully you've learned something new and maybe you're feeling a little bit more committed to making a difference in this fight, in the fight against prejudice. Till next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for a more just world, a more compassionate world. As we kind of wrap things up here, one thing keeps coming back to me is that idea of owning your identity as resistance, Remember that student who said wearing her Jewish and Israeli identity proudly, it was like armor against all the hate.
Yeah, that's a powerful image, right? It's about not being the victim, but being empowered. It's about saying, this is who I am, and you can't take that away from me.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual strength either, right? It's about finding allies, building solidarity. David's message to those Christian students, he was urging them to stand with their Jewish friends, to be allies. He made it clear that interfaith partnerships are so important in tackling this, this whole problem.
And it shows that we need to be coming at this from all angles, right? It's not enough to just condemn hatred. We have to build those bridges, create a culture where bigotry just isn't okay.
Yeah.
Any kind of bigotry.
Right. And this deep dive, I think, has really shown us how serious this is, this rise of anti-Semitism, especially on college campuses. We've heard what it's like for students like Angelina, David, and Amanda, but we've also seen their determination to fight back, to learn, to make things better.
And their experiences, I think they offer some really valuable lessons for all of us, no matter who we are, what our background is. Like, for example, they show us how important it is to recognize the different forms anti-Semitism can take. It's not always like blatant swastikas and hate speech. It can be much more subtle, like questioning the Holocaust or denying Israel's right to exist.
And those subtler forms, sometimes I think they're even more dangerous, right? Because they fly under the radar. But they still create this hostile environment, and that can lead to much worse things.
Absolutely. And another thing they've shown us, the importance of firsthand experience. These students went to Israel with certain ideas, right? Based on what they'd heard. And a lot of those ideas were just blown away by what they actually experienced there.
It's a good reminder that we can't just rely on what other people tell us, especially with issues that are this complex, this emotional. Sometimes you have to see things for yourself, challenge your own assumptions.
Yeah, for sure.
Even though we've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff, I'm feeling hopeful. Seeing these young people, their courage, it's inspiring.
It is, and it gives me hope, too. They show us that change is possible, but we have to be a part of it. We all have to be working towards a better world, a more just world, a more compassionate world. And that brings us to, I think, a final thought. We've been focusing on anti-Semitism, but prejudice, hate, it goes way beyond that. So how can we all, every one of us, how can we help build a more inclusive world, a more tolerant world, where everyone feels safe, respected, valued?
What can we do? What actions can we take, no matter how small, to challenge bias, to challenge discrimination?
Yeah, that's what we need to be asking ourselves. Because, look, if we want a better world, we can't just sit back and hope it happens. We have to get involved. We have to act.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a lot. Hopefully you've learned some things along the way, and maybe you're feeling a little bit more, ready to get involved, to make a difference in this fight against all kinds of prejudice. So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for that better world, that more just world, that more compassionate world. We can do it.